That was built by Rogers Locomotive Works of Paterson, New Jersey. Later on that year, that became part of the American Locomotive Company, or ALCO Works. This became a component of them. Delivered in Louisville in 1905, and when it was delivered, 152 and the Pacific engine was rather a new style. A fast passenger engine is what it was designed to be. So it spent its first part of its life from 1905 to about the 1920s, running the main line between Louisville and Nashville, and other branch lines that came off that main. Up north in the Kentucky area, Kentucky to maybe Atlanta. They were very common in that service. In the 1920s, there came some bigger passenger power, the 482 Mountains, and those kind of displaced, especially the early Pacifics, smaller ones like 152. It's actually retired in 1953 in Mobile, Alabama. So after that, this locomotive was kind of the story. The fledgling railway museum had asked the LN, we being based in Louisville, the railroad being based in Louisville, our founding fathers went and asked the Louisville Nashville for a steam locomotive for display, seeing that these things were being retired and scrapped. And this particular locomotive, John Tilford was the president of the LN at the time. He had a personal liking of this engine, the looks of it. He actually used it after it was retired, and even a little bit before. Like they opened a new passenger station in Mobile, Alabama in 1951. They had LN 152 on display there, so he kind of took good personal care of it. And when the request was made for a museum or for a piece to be donated to the museum, he specifically called out this engine and had it moved back up to Louisville to the main repair shops for cosmetic restoration before being presented to us. And that went on in the time frame like 1956, 57 kind of time frame when it was donated to the museum. Well, Pacific type locomotive, 462, in our wheel arrangement type. It runs on 200 pounds of pressure. It is superheated. It has some. When it came out from the factory, actually, it was not a superheated locomotive. It had slide valves instead of piston valves for it, and was not superheated. The LN pretty quickly on got the locomotive in and started making improvements to it. We have a picture of it. By 1912, they've gone in and they've changed the cylinder castings. So now it has piston type valves, it has a superheater. So they very quickly adapted any modern advances with these locomotives. So the restoration, the museum was like Greg said, started in the part down by the Ohio River. Foundation of the museum really began. The genesis was about 1954. By 1957, they had a spot. The locomotive was donated. So they brought it in. For the first few years, actually, they built a couple of fires every now and again to steam it up, maybe once or twice a year. But it was landlocked, so they couldn't go anywhere. So from 1957, it kind of sat just on display. And the actual restoration, beginning when it was restored the first time, began in 1972. So that was the start of the original restoration of 152. So the restoration took a while. Restoration went from 1972 to 1985. And then in 1985, when they did their first fire ups, had a very good relationship. The local railroad at the time, L&N, through mergers and acquisition, had become a Seaboard System Railroad here in the United States. And so they did several excursions in the period from 1986 to 1988, basically about a 3-year time period. Did several excursions on the Seaboard System Railroad, And those went from places, we started out with shorter trips, like from Louisville, Kentucky to Lexington, Kentucky, which is about a little less than 100 miles each way. They do round trips. We went from there to Maysville, Kentucky, which is up on the Ohio River between Louisville and Cincinnati. In 1987, the locomotive was actually leased to Norfolk Southern and made some trips over to Tennessee and the Eastern Kentucky coal regions. And then we actually did a trip, the longest trip that it ever took an excursion service. It went from Louisville down into the Eastern Kentucky coal fields and all the way over into far western Virginia to, I think, Appalachia and Northern Virginia was the places that it went on that trip. So, regional trips. It didn't go, more than 2 or 3 states away from Louisville, but those were the kind of trips that they made in the excursion era from 1986 through 1988. The original restoration ended in 85. At the time, they were on a 5-year cycle here in the United States to do the boiler ticket, if you will. So they were able to continue that for a couple of cycles. The locomotive actually went down in 1996, right when I first came on to the museum. It was actually down, and they did some extensive boiler work in the time period from 1996 to 1998. In 1999-2000 timeframe, the rules were changed again. We came up with a new code here in the States, the current code that we operate under, which basically says 15-year repair cycles between the time that you take the boiler down, remove all the tubes, flues, check everything in the boiler, and decide what needs to be replaced. So they got on that 15-year cycle. So the locomotive ran, under these different rules, basically continuously between 1986 and 2011, with about a 2 or 3 year break in there to address the boiler work that we did in the late 1990s. The original guys who had headed the restoration, a lot of them were starting to get a little bit older, and they kind of had said, well, we've kept this thing going for 30 years. A lot of them have been involved since 1972, so you're talking almost 40 years now. So those guys kind of stepped back, and they said, well, if this is going to happen, some of you younger guys are going to have to step up, and take the reins and move this thing forward. So it took a few years, for us to build up some support in there. So I would say from between 2011 and 2014, that was the time of us looking internally, saying, it's going to be us, us younger guys, who's in, who's not, what skills do people bring. So that kind of period from 2011 till 2014, we finally decided, hey, we've got to decide. The locomotive basically set in the barn for 3 years at that point, and we said, either we're going to do a cosmetic restoration and put it out on display, or we're going to bite the bullet and go through this locomotive and do a full on restoration. So 2014 is when that effort started. we had to do basically we have disassembled the locomotive entirely. We started out, first thing we did, um, the most important thing in any restoration is that, as everyone knows, these things, run on money, right? So the very first thing you decide you want to restore a steam locomotive, you've got to put it together a fundraising plan, before you do anything else. So, we set about at that point, putting together, a fundraising campaign, which we called Crew 152, to raise some initial funds, so that we could get in and do an initial survey. Those efforts were successful. We did a few events. We had a few personal, people that donated, rather significant sums of money to us. Said, hey, we're behind you. Here's some seed money to go see what needs to happen. So, starting in 2014, we did that. By 2016, we'd raised enough money, to bring in an organization at the time called the Coalition for Sustainable Rail. Those individuals have now kind of morphed into a rather well-known restoration group here in the United States called FMW Solutions. So they came and we hired them to come in and give us, an overall evaluation, not just of the boiler, but everything, with the locomotive, the running gear. So that was done in 2016, and from there we were able to basically put together a repair plan, and put some numbers to the items that they said, hey, need to be addressed, and then be back to the everybody's favorite activity. Now we got to go raise funds, right? To do all this. So that's kind of the story of most startups. Raise a little money, spend a little money, find out you got to spend more money, and go raise more money. Right? It's the natural progression of things. So, well, we realized pretty early on that the way we were going to go about this restoration would be to probably separate the locomotive into several components. It depends on the level of work that you're doing, but it is more cost effective for you to if you can, to send your boiler off rather than pay people per diem to come and work on it, in your location. So the very first thing, we decided pretty early on that the boiler is going to have to come off. So we spent, a great deal of time separating that from the frame. There are, in the smoke box area, I think there's 48 bolts that are tapered bolts in there. We had to drill each one of those out, and get in order to separate the boiler from the frame. We were able to do that. Thankfully, a boiler with no tubes in it weighs approximately 30,000 pounds. It's not super heavy. We were able to handle that in-house. We do have a rail crane that was able to handle that part of it. So the first biggest item really was separating the boiler from the frame, and then putting that in a manner that we could then ship it off to a facility to be worked on. After we did that, the next, and I've sent some photos to you, I think, that show some of those lifts going on. Our crane would not handle the lifting of the frame. Was much heavier than the boiler. So we had to then turn our attention to the frame, because we had to get all the driving wheels, the driving boxes, all the rotating parts underneath, out from under the locomotive, and all the boxes that they ride in. We had to get those off. So that was took probably the better part of a year's worth of planning. We had to find a way to get it. We needed a bigger crane. So it's easy to say get a bigger crane, but that's expensive. So we were able to, through one of our board members, actually get a local construction company to donate a crane and the services to do that. But those things take time, right? To put those deals together and get those donations secured, and then find a hole in those people's schedule, because they're doing this pro bono, right? So kind of have to work around when their availability is. So yeah, the the biggest things for us, the most major milestones have probably been the lifts of the blower off the frame, and then the lift of the frame off the drivers. And really, museums, particularly KRM, we've not always been as financially in a great place. Honestly, we have over the past few years, we have actually on the 17 miles of track that we have the ability to store cars for that aren't being used. So we have some new sources of revenue that weren't available in the past. But a lot of the things that were done on the first restoration, they did a lot of like buildup of components by welding, shimming things, and that kind of stuff. So there were things that now we're going back and rather than trying to make do with a component that may be getting close to the end of a service life, we're making new components such as shoes and wedges, the hubs on the axles, and that kind of stuff. We have a partnership some years ago in 2016. We actually leased a 284 Berkshire type locomotive, 2716, Cino 2716, to the Kentucky Steam Heritage Corporation. They are based a couple of hours east of us, and their chief mechanical officer also has his own company specializing in steam locomotive restoration. He set up shop at their campus. So Next Generation Rail Solutions is our contractor, and he is, like I said, based there in Ravenna, Irvine, Kentucky, about 2 hours east of here. So we've actually moved the boiler over there, as well as the driving wheels and driving boxes, and he's able to do things there at his location, as far as putting the work into the boiler and the running gear and things like that. So that's where it is. The good part about that, being so close, we're able to get over there relatively, easily. So we can also participate, put our volunteer hours in, doing things that, are within our scope of being able to do. He obviously, has the welding and machining capabilities, better than a lot of us here as volunteers, but there's certainly no shortage of things that can be cleaned or, this basic small little areas, reaming, drilling, things that don't take a lot of technical expertise, but certainly take a lot of time with the boiler. The crown sheet is going to be replaced in the firebox, and we're doing some work on the tube sheets as well. So yeah, there's significant firebox work. We did a lot of work in 96 to 98 to the rear part of the firebox. So areas that weren't touched then, we're going in and addressing now.
And the driving wheel tires, have they had to be replaced at all?
Yeah, we are actually going to replace the driving wheel tires. We have we had some cracking in the wheel centers. So Jason, our contractor there, has been spending a lot of time grinding out and welding up cracks in the wheel centers. We're helped because they're cast steel, so they're perfectly weldable. That's been one of the main things. Yeah, the driving tires will be one of the things that we're going to be purchasing and applying here, probably the next year.
And the other one I was going to ask you about is the tender in good condition.
Tender's in good condition internally. Yeah, we actually, over the last couple of weeks, I don't know if you follow our Facebook page or not, but we've been actually pulling the trucks out from underneath the tender. Now we had some old trucks laying out in the yard that we cleaned up and serviced the brasses on and put underneath of it so we could roll it around. But we did have some broken springs in our truck assemblies, so we've gotten those out, and we're going to be addressing that. But there are wear points on them, so we're going through cleaning everything up and addressing any deficiencies that we find in the tender trucks as well. But the inside of the tender, yes, is in decent shape. We're going to have to do some maybe some spot welding, some places in the water cistern, but there's no issues with the coal bunker or anything like that.
Is this the only member of its class preserved?
It is for sure. Yeah, everything else, even the ones L&N built. Yeah, there were only actually three extant L&N locomotives. We own two of them. The other one is in Corbin, Kentucky, down there at the sister, the 2152. It's the 2132. That was unfortunately all the L&N saved. They had some beautiful locomotives, both homemade. Had some really beautiful Pacifics, larger than 152. You know, the apogee of L&N's this design was the M1 class. They called them Big Emmas on the L&N 284. And it's unfortunate, yeah, that none of those were saved for preservation. When they were restoring it in the 80s, the goal was always mainline excursions, and they did some things, you know, to the locomotive. They added a power reverse. They put a bigger tender on it in order to make it more feasible for mainline restoration work. And you know, we have our own track, which is great. We have the ability to control our own destiny, if you will. But one of the things that we've said in this group, we're actually looking maybe to do some things that kind of backdate the engine a little bit. This engine in service they have a cross compound compressor on it now for more air supply, you know, for longer trains. But it never ran with that kind of compressor in service. So we're looking at the potential maybe of going back to two single stage compressors instead of a cross compound. And would love to. It's not necessarily going to happen, you know, right now, but we do have the tender that 152 was donated with, much smaller tender. So, you know, it's a hope that one day we can maybe restore that smaller tender and put behind it.
What other jobs are going to be needed to get the 152 going? Is there anything else that needs to be done while the boiler's away?
Oh yeah, yeah. So we're handling a lot of the stuff around the frame and running gear. So we're going through, you know, we're doing all the tender trucks, all the brake components, the spring rigging, equalizers. We'll be doing any frame repairs that need to happen. We'll be cleaning and painting. You know, so yeah, lots of things are happening here. You know, in our shop at the at KRM as well. One of the things we elected not to move the frame off the property. We're going to be putting new cylinder liners in, so that job will actually happen here at the museum. Jason, our principal contractor, will be doing that, but he'll be doing that here on site because it was too cost prohibitive to move the frame off and not worth it for that little bit of work that needed to be done by an outside contractor. But you know, there's no shortage of things that need to be cleaned, primed, and painted out there. We're taking the whole locomotive apart, so that's what we're going to be working on here. You know, as Jason finishes up with the driving boxes, right? We're going to bring those back. We'll mate them back up to the frame, put the frame back on the drivers, and then start bolting up, you know, underneath that the brake rigging that we've been working on here. You know, cleaning, priming, painting, doing any machining or welding that needs to be done. So you know, there's no shortage of things that need to be done here. We're taking care of all the accessories. So dynamo, we've had one of our older volunteers, Lewis Hicks. He's took that one, you know, kind of his personal project. So we've actually got the dynamo ready to be painted, ready to go. It's all been tuned up internally. We're working on the air compressors ourselves, power reverse, and all the injectors and things like that we'll be working on here. So lots of little jobs.